Welcome to TRN Podcast, episode 145.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're going to take a look at the newly formed German federal government under Chancellor Merz, based on some recent reports and commentary.
Yes, there's a lot to unpack.
Our aim is really to get a handle on the key personnel choices and what they might signal about the government's overall direction.
And that could tell us a lot about potential shifts in German politics and policy going forward.
So what's the general first impression coming out of the commentary?
Well, the term that keeps cropping up is a solid team, but interestingly, also one assembled with courage to leave gaps.
Courage to leave gaps. What exactly does that mean in this context?
It seems to suggest Merz hasn't necessarily filled every post with a subject matter expert, maybe prioritizing other qualities. And another strong theme is loyalty.
Right, loyalty seems key. Observers are noting he's brought in loyalists, sometimes even if their specific political leanings differ a bit from his own core positions.
Exactly. Which also leads to the point that the cabinet doesn't perfectly mirror, the proportional strength of all the different CDU factions, the CDA, various regional groups, and so on.
So less about internal party balancing, perhaps, and more about building his team.
That seems to be the interpretation. It does raise questions about how those internal party dynamics might play out down the line.
Okay, let's dig into some of the key appointments then. Jens Spahn, as Fraktionschef, the parliamentary group leader, he's described as a contentious ally.
Yes, and the expectation seems to be that he'll set a distinctly right-leaning tone, especially in public debates concerning the AfD and also potentially the church.
A contentious ally setting the tone. How might that actually manifest? A tougher line in debates.
Probably sharper rhetoric, clearer demarcation lines drawn, particularly towards the AfD, maybe championing more traditionally conservative values. It could certainly lead to some friction.
And then there's Julia Klöckner as Bundestag's president and president of the parliament, also tagged as a contentious ally.
Right. Another prominent figure, maybe somewhat polarizing, in a really central position. Putting those two figures, Spahn and Klöckner, in such visible roles, well, it feels quite deliberate, doesn't it?
It does suggest a certain willingness to, let's say, lean into controversy, or at least not shy away from clear, perhaps right conservative positioning.
That could be one reading, yes. A signal of readiness for debate and a clear stance. Then you have Wolfgang Weimer as culture minister. Reports mention first headwinds from the cultural scene almost immediately.
Ah, yes. That appointment stirred things up quickly. What does that early resistance tell us?
It might indicate Merz is prepared to shake things up in cultural policy, even if it provokes immediate pushback. It'll be interesting to see the follow-through on policy there.
Definitely one to watch. Now, Corinne Prien as education minister is interesting too. She's generally seen as being from the more liberal wing of the CDU.
Which supports that earlier idea, doesn't it? Rewarding loyalty, perhaps, even across different ideological leanings within the party.
So what might be the calculation there? Appealing to a broader base within the CDU while putting an experienced figure in charge of a key ministry.
That seems plausible. It shows maybe a pragmatic streak alongside the loyalty focus. Then there's the foreign ministry, Johann Wadephul. Quite significant. Isn't he the first CDU foreign minister in something like 60 years?
I believe so, yes. A long time. And reports suggest he's expected to work very closely with Merz on foreign policy.
Which likely means foreign policy direction will be tightly aligned with the chancellor's own views. Less ministerial autonomy, perhaps.
Could be. More top-down coordination from the chancellery. And speaking of the chancellery, Thorsten Frey is the new head. He's known as a close confidant of Merz.
Yes, a crucial position. The head of the chancellery is essentially the government's chief operating officer. Putting a trusted ally there ensures smooth coordination and direct implementation of the chancellor's agenda.
Right, the nerve center. Okay, now for one of those courage to leave gaps examples, Nina Warken as health minister, her background is in interior policy, described as a non-expert for health.
Exactly. This is where that phrase really seems to apply. What's the thinking? Maybe a fresh perspective is desired, someone to manage, rather than be deep in the policy weeds from day one.
Possibly hoping for new approaches to persistent healthcare challenges, but there's obviously a risk too, right? A steep learning curve, lack of deep domain knowledge initially.
Definitely the gamble.
Yeah.
Similar vibes perhaps with Karsten Wildberger as digital minister. He's called a lateral entrant from the private sector, largely unknown in political circles.
Yeah, an outsider brought in with a specific mission, digitize the administration, modernize the federal structure. Huge task.
Huge. The hope is clearly to inject some private sector dynamism into, well, what many see as a sluggish bureaucracy, but navigating the political landscape without prior experience. That's a challenge in itself, potential for resistance too.
And finally, Alexander Dobrindt as Interior Minister, a social scientist from Bavaria tasked with implementing some pretty ambitious migration policies.
Right, he's got political experience. But the migration file is notoriously complex and contentious. He'll need to translate those policy goals into workable measures, balancing lots of competing pressures.
So looking at all these appointments together, what picture emerges of Merz's leadership style and his overall political strategy?
It really looks like he's aiming to give the CDU a clearly right conservative profile, as commentators suggest. He's building a team based heavily on personal trust and loyalty, even if it means including figures from different wings or bringing in outsiders.
And this willingness to appoint non-experts. It suggests certain confidence in his own ability to direct and manage. Or maybe a belief that management skill trumps specific expertise in some roles.
Perhaps a bit of both. It's definitely a distinctive approach. It also ties into the message Merz seems to be sending to the country.
Yes, there was that quote circulating, wasn't there? Saying his government won't be a socio-political project like the previous coalition.
Exactly. The emphasis is apparently on pragmatically solving major problems, not on, large-scale social reengineering.
He's also apparently preparing people for a difficult path, saying there's no time for euphoria. It sounds very much like managing expectations, doesn't it? A sort of roll-up-our-sleeves message.
Very much so. Realpolitik, focusing on tangible issues. It sets a certain tone right from the start.
So wrapping this up for now, it seems the expectations for this new government are, pretty high.
Absolutely. Merz has made his choices, put his team in place. Now these appointees really have to deliver and prove they're up to the task.
It's quite a mix, isn't it? Loyalists, some more controversial figures, newcomers, a few surprises. How this blend actually works in practice remains to be seen.
Indeed. The coming months will be crucial.
Okay, that brings us towards the end of our discussion for today on the new Merz cabinet. We've touched on the key players and the potential direction. So a final thought for you, our listeners. Considering these personnel choices and the stated priorities, what do you see as the biggest challenges ahead for this government? And maybe, where do you see potential for success? What aspects of this new political setup will you be watching most closely?